Mysterious disappearance. Carl Landers has vanished into the mist. His friend heard strange noises. A 69-year-old man, fit and healthy, determined to conquer one of America's most legendary mountains. A clear plan, a companion, the right equipment, and the right amount of time. But in a moment, a seemingly innocuous decision, he stepped into the mists of Mount Shasta and disappeared. Without a trace, without a word. No one has seen him since. This was not the beginning of a mystery. This was a real investigation, well documented by police rescue teams and surviving relatives. But the deeper you dig, the more you try to explain, every theory evaporates like smoke in the mountain wind. Name of missing person: Carl Landers. Place of disappearance: Avalanche Gulch, the southern slope of Mount Shasta, California. Time: morning of May 22, 1999. More than 25 years have passed since then. No body has been found. No personal belongings have been recovered, and no one knows what really happened. In this investigative series, we'll retrace Carl's last steps, follow police records, listen to haunting witness accounts, and confront the ultimate question. Was there something out of this world that happened on that sacred mountain? Carl Landers isn't the type of guy you'd expect to disappear on a mountain hike. At 69, he's kept in good shape thanks to his training with the Orinda Road Runners, a California club for seniors. He's also fit and often goes on hikes with his close friends, Barry Gilmore and Milt Gaines. He was no dreamer, nor was he a daredevil. In fact, Carl had failed once to climb Mount Shasta, and that had motivated him to return. "This time I'm going to make it to the top," he assured his wife. On May 21st, 1999, the trio set out. They started in the town of Mount Shasta, climbed to Bunny Flat, and camped at a spot called 50-50 Camp that night. The weather was harsh, with winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour, but they were able to set up camp in the snow thanks to their experience. Carl, however, began to show signs of fatigue. He developed diarrhea, possibly a side effect of Diamox, a medication to prevent altitude sickness. His companions helped him carry his backpack, a rare occurrence for this independent and headstrong man. Carl did not eat dinner, did not talk much, but was determined to continue his journey to Lake Helen the next morning. On the morning of May 22nd, at 9:00 a.m., Milt and Barry asked Carl to go ahead to Lake Helen while they broke camp. Carl said only one word: "Okay." That was the last time they heard his voice. When the two friends set off about 45 minutes later, Carl was nowhere in sight. They thought they would catch up with him soon, but all the way up Lake Helen they saw no one, no trace, no footprints, no calls. Milt met a ranger at Lake Helen who said he had talked to an older man in a red and purple shirt, asking about the way to the top, but he wasn't sure if it was Carl. Milt saw in the distance someone climbing the slope in a manner very similar to Carl's 5 steps, then a rest, then 5 steps, then a sit, but the person was too far away. It couldn't have been Carl, who had been so tired and so slow the day before. When Milt returned to 50-50 to find Carl, there was no one. Every sign of him had disappeared from the mountain. On the morning of May 21st, 1999, Carl Landers, 69, and 2 longtime friends, Barry Gilmore and Milt Gaines, set out on a hike to the iconic Mount Shasta, California. Carl's companions had traveled with him on dozens of difficult routes across the state of California. During the first leg of the journey from Bunny Flat to Horse Camp, Carl began to have frequent diarrhea, possibly due to the side effects of the Diamox, or the high pressure itself. Despite his weakened health, Carl decided to continue the journey. His companions offered to carry his backpack to lighten the load, which was a strange sign that he accepted. Around 8 p.m., the group reached 50-50, a campsite on the way up the mountain. Along the way, an unknown hiker met Carl on the trail and told Milt and Barry that he was having trouble. Reaching down, the two friends found Carl and helped him carry his backpack to the campsite. Go wrote in detail about the night of the camp that Carl did not eat dinner, continued to be tired, and went outside several times. Despite his weakened condition, Carl decided to continue climbing to reach Lake Helen, reasoning that this was his last chance in life to conquer Mount Shasta. On the morning of May 22nd, Barry and Milt asked Carl to go ahead while they packed up camp. Carl agreed and left never to be seen again. About 45 minutes later, Barry set off followed by Milt. They expected to see Carl again along the way, but found no trace of him. Milt reached Lake Helen, met a ranger, and was told that someone resembling Carl had passed by. However, this connection was uncertain. It was the last trace before Carl Landers completely disappeared. In the scene of many mountain climbers, the mountain path is not too bright. The fact that a person wearing a bright shirt like Carl is burned is inexplicable. Mount Shasta, a majestic peak that towers over 14,000 feet in California, is famous not only for its majestic landscape, but also for its mysterious stories. The land surrounding the mountain is shrouded in legends of the hidden Lemuria, civilization portals to other worlds, and unexplained disappearances. Among them, the disappearance of Carl Landers, a 69-year-old man with extensive experience and enthusiasm for mountain climbing, has become one of the most difficult mysteries ever recorded. Carl was no stranger to mountains. With dozens of previous trips, he and his two close friends, Barry Gilmore and Milt Gaines, had planned to climb Mount Shasta as part of a journey to climb the highest peak in every county in California. But this time, things didn't go as planned. As he climbed to nearly 10,000 feet, Carl began to show signs of extreme fatigue, with symptoms of diarrhea and altitude sickness. Still, he was determined to continue. That morning, Carl walked alone on the trail leading to Lake Helen, and that was the last time anyone saw him. On the morning of May 22, 1999, at the 50-50 stop on the Shasta Ridge, the three men awoke with plans to continue climbing to Lake Helen to decide whether to continue their journey to the summit. Strong winds made it difficult to break camp. Carl, walking heavily and pale, agreed to leave camp first to make the slow ascent to Lake Helen. Carl went ahead at about 9 a.m. Milt and Barry, after clearing camp, started the ascent about 45 minutes later, but when they reached Lake Helen, Carl was nowhere to be seen. A ranger recalled seeing someone who looked like Carl asking for directions to the summit. The man had been advised to take the easy route, but no one was sure if it was Carl. Milt saw a lone figure ascending the difficult route, but could not confirm his identity. Concerned, Milt returned to 50-50 and went down to Bunny Flat to call the police. Rescue teams were dispatched that night. Over the next several days, a massive search operation was launched with aircraft dogs and dozens of rescue workers. But no trace of Carl was ever found. The Siskiyou County Sheriff's Department had been notified the night Carl went missing. A command center had been set up at the Weed Airport, where rescuers were moving equipment and personnel. Every detail about Carl, age, clothing, health status, planned route was entered into the rescue system. In the days that followed, about 70 people joined the search. They searched every nook and cranny from 50-50 to Lake Helen, following every known trail and even the surrounding area under the trees where Carl might have gotten lost if he had turned around. But all their efforts were in vain. There were no tracks, no abandoned equipment, no footprints, no clue that Carl had ever left 50-50. Even more suspicious was the fact that some commanding officers, including Sergeant Nicholson, reported that Carl was last seen at Horse Camp rather than 50-50. This skewed the search in the early days, causing many important areas to be missed. While rescuers continued to search, the mountain detectives from the sheriff's office also conducted a criminal investigation, aiming to rule out foul play. They interviewed Carl's wife, Bobby Landers, and his 3 children. The family insisted that Carl had no enemies, no financial problems, and no reason to leave everything on his own. Milt and Barry, in interviews, expressed heartache and remorse, and insisted that they never thought anything bad could happen to Carl. They recounted an incident 2 years earlier in Monterey County, where Carl had gotten lost after falling behind and reappeared severely dehydrated, an experience everyone thought had taught him a lesson. But this time it seemed was different. After a week of finding nothing, the search began to expand to lower treeline areas like Cascade Gulch Sand Flat and McBride Springs, places where Carl might have drifted if he had gone astray. But each area was checked and still nothing. No clothes, no sleeping bag, no sign of movement. With each passing day, hope faded. On June 3rd, after nearly 2 weeks, the search officially ended. "We've looked everywhere we can think of," said a police spokesman, "and we don't know where else to look." The case was moved to a closed due to lack of lead status. Further searches in the area where Landers disappeared yielded no results. Carl Landers, the stalwart, the trusted companion, had disappeared completely, as if he had never been on the mountain. As the 10th day of the search wore on, the exhaustion was evident not only on the faces of the rescue workers, but also on the hearts of Carl Landers' loved ones. The scene was a familiar one every morning at the command post at Weed Airport: sprawling maps, crackling radios, and crisscrossing red notes, tracing each step of the search. However, in daily meetings, confusion remained the biggest topic. Every proposed solution was quickly eliminated. People began whispering about the unsolvable nature of the incident. "I've never seen a person disappear before my eyes," like that one SAR team leader sighed at a closed-door press conference. "He just vanished into thin air." Carl left no trace behind, no footprints, no gear, no bright red and purple clothing he had worn that day. People who had traveled that route on that fateful day were interviewed. More than a dozen witnesses claimed to have seen no one matching the description. In fact, between Lake Helen and the 50-50 point where Carl had started, there was no place to hide or hide. A steep, snow-covered slope with visibility for hundreds of yards. The questions kept coming. Had Carl decided to turn? But to do so would require climbing steep, rocky slopes impossible for a man whose condition was deteriorating by the hour. A ranger suggested he might have gotten lost, but GPS topographic maps and satellite imagery showed no other unmistakable trails. A more sinister theory began to be discussed: what had happened between Carl and his two friends, Milt and Barry, told a consistent story, both grieving and expressing remorse, but some investigators still did not rule out the possibility of internal conflict. However, after repeated questioning, they were both ruled out as suspects. An independent witness, a ranger at Lake Helen, claimed to have encountered an older man asking for directions to the summit. The man was dressed in dark clothing and traveling alone. When shown a photo of Carl, he could not confirm that it was the man he had seen. This threw the case into a dark place if no one had seen Carl, but a similar man had appeared, who was the man Carl could not have moved quickly enough to meet the ranger before Milt arrived. The helicopter circled the area around Avalanche Gulch, extending into the Red Banks and Green Butte areas. Although aerial images showed every rock formation and snow edge, nothing suspicious was found. Fellow Orinda Road runners were later called in to learn about Carl's character. They confirmed he was decisive, confident, but not impulsive. Another detail that puzzled investigators. 2 years earlier, Carl had gotten lost while hiking in Monterey County. That time, he had strayed from a group and lost his way. But that time, he had been found exhausted but safe. Could this disappearance be a repeat, but in terrain so inhospitable that the consequences were irreversible? Sheriff Grizz Adams, who coordinated the search, still remembers the details. "We had every resource mobilized, every avenue explored," he said in an interview. "I kept waiting for that purple coat to emerge from the snow, but nothing. Perhaps as some joke Carl has entered some invisible door between space and time," he added, his voice heavy with years of pain. Although he did not believe in paranormal theories, many people began to mention the legends surrounding Mount Shasta, a place known as a sacred land with stories about portals leading to other worlds, alien creatures, or ancient spirits. Still, reason prevailed in the official reports. The disappearance was ruled unexplained, and the pain lingered. Carl's relatives, after a long and hopeless wait, gradually accepted that he would not return. In 2000, the case was officially transferred to inactive status. Every summer after that, when the snow melted and the vegetation began to revive, a group of people would quietly return to the 50-50 and Lake Helen area, hoping to find even the smallest trace, a glove, a piece of clothing, anything. But everything remained quiet. Carl Landers, a 69-year-old man determined to complete his life's journey, disappeared into the side of Mount Shasta as if he had never existed. Winters are cold. Summers are hot with winds blowing up from the valley. Back in July 1999, Carl Landers' disappearance was like a knife to the hearts of those who knew him. The case left relatives with endless hope and investigators with countless unanswered questions. His wife Bobby, of more than 44 years, could not help but believe that Carl would return. Every time she heard a helicopter fly over the roof, she would look up a habit that was all too familiar. Every neighbor and friend in the Orinda Roadrunners group could not forget the image of the skinny man with the tattoo final end on his wrist that they knew. Over the years, some people have reported hearing strange footsteps as they walk through the woods at Avalanche Gulch, as if someone were trying to climb up the mountain, breathing raggedly. Some accounts have been exaggerated. A tall man dressed in dark clothes loomed behind the trees, then disappeared when their eyes met. The incredible thing is that all the rumors are unreliable. There are no maps, no redundant radio or cell phone signals. These are stories that exist only in the dark, amid the rustle of leaves and the wind blowing through the cliffs. Mount Shasta is the horizon of legends about the Lurian civilization and the portal to another dimension. Accordingly, the disappearance of someone like Carl at 50-50, where light and dark clash, is typical of a rite of passage to another reality. Proponents of this theory say that the energy amplitude there is especially strong enough to lead people to another dimension. Some people have built a story about an energy pyramid located right under Lake Helen, which, given enough time and spirit not pulled down by fear, will be sucked away and disappear without a trace. These are hypotheses based on legends difficult to verify by scientific methods. Back to what logic remains, an experienced climber suffering from altitude sickness determined to reach the summit despite his medical condition could have lost consciousness, slipped, and hit a small crevice no one noticed. And then his heart stopped. But it is worth mentioning the crevice left behind a trace of bones or equipment, even though the snow had melted away. No one said that Carl's death was impossible, just that the tragedy is now obscured by the clouds of time. Recently, Siskiyou PD headquarters discussed using helicopters and low-frequency radar to search for Carl's DNA and old clothing. However, the cluttered terrain, limited range, and limited resources made the plan unviable. The sense of responsibility was divided. Some believed it should be abandoned. Others were enthusiastic in their support. The theory that there just happened to be a small crevice under the trail, deep enough to hide the body and clothing, has also not been proven. If someone were sent down to investigate near the cliff, they would have to check every square inch around Lake Helen, a task that would not only be extremely time-consuming, but also life-threatening. In 2005, a group of volunteers returned with optical devices. As the sun rose, hidden in the trees, a reflective wire was visible. However, when they got closer, all that was left was trash from a group of young climbers who had climbed nearby. No one recognized the purple-red color of the shirt Carl had worn that day. Half-happy, half-sad hope seemed to flicker and then fade. Numerology says that on May 27, 1999, the conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn creates a tilted intersection where the line between reality and the supernatural is easily bending. Some spiritual organizations believe that this day is the most fertile spot for missing persons, drawing the mind into an endless silence. But these explanations are all metaphorical, without any basis in evidence. On the 10th anniversary of his disappearance, Carl's wife sat in front of a small altar in the house. On the shelf were pictures, Carl with a purple-red sleeping bag on a cliff under the trees. She cried, "Honey, if I still knew where you were, I just wanted to see you healthy." Reaching the top with a satisfied look in your eyes, each day that passed, my heart was broken a little more. Dad could be lying in the snow, or in a crevasse somewhere, his son Carl Jr. said at the memorial service. If he comes back one day, what will be the first thing he says? An apology to those who were worried, a word of encouragement to those still climbing. or just a nod, "I did it." Many in the SAR community look back on the Carl case with a haunting sense of the limits of human investigation. Sometimes it's not a lack of people tools or effort, but simply a pure disappearance whose key word is "shut up." Footsteps were scanned, key fobs checked, signals were tracked, wind speeds were recorded, avalanche warnings were issued, but all were equally silent. Physically, everything Carl brought with him is still within the range of being found. Non-physically, everything is too difficult to prove. People consider this one of the most mysterious, central disappearances, because it does not fit neatly into any theory. 20 years after his disappearance, Carl Lander's name still pops up in the climbing community when discussing the strangest disappearances in American history. His story is featured in climbing safety seminars, SAR training courses, and special documentaries about Mount Shasta. But for his family, the pain is never over. His wife Bobby still kept Carl's study intact. His climbing hat hung on the corner of the bookshelf. His trail notebooks and maps of the summit hung on the wall as if nothing had happened. She still celebrated his birthday every year, quietly and tearfully. To her, Carl wasn't dead, he was just gone for a long time. Carl's story has made the climbing community more aware of the limits of survival, the role of teammates, and the need for constant location updates. Some groups have developed mini GPS wearables that can transmit signals even in bad weather, with special battery backups. A Carl Landers Foundation has been established to support mountain rescue teams and train volunteers. Mountain safety seminars at the University of California include Carl's case in their curriculum. They are not meant to inspire fear, but to emphasize the importance of preparation, knowing your limits, and understanding the unique terrain. Recently, a private investigator, D. Eric Matheson, published an independent analysis of a 1999 satellite topographic map and previously unpublished logs, in which Carl noted that he wanted to try a different route, didn't rely on the old trail, and had a feeling this was the last time. Matheson concluded that Carl could have taken a different route from 50-50, crossing the ridge to the right, aiming for the Red Rock Point near Red Banks. However, if Carl had strayed south-southwest, he would have entered a deep canyon where few people had gone. That would explain why no one had seen him. He had not followed the main road. Matheson attempted to recreate the route using a drone, but was hampered by the harsh terrain. Part of the location he suspected collapsed years later, making the theory even harder to verify. Shasta is more than just a mountain. It is a place where science and mysticism meet. The legend of the Lumeria, the mysterious white man, the supernatural, have led many to believe that this mountain is special. After Carl's disappearance, some New Age groups considered him a chosen one. They held group meditations claiming to feel his energy around Lake Helen. However, psychologists say it is a mechanism created by humans to understand what they cannot understand. A way to ease the anxiety when reality is not enough to explain. However, when science is silent, religion and spirituality step up to take the place. In 2012, Barry, his companion that year, published a memoir, We Started Out 3. In the book, he recounted previous journeys with Carl, the laughter along the way, and especially that fateful day. He wrote, "I saw Carl walking his lean but determined figure. I thought if anyone could have made it to Lake Helen that day, it could have been him." At the end of the book, he shares, "I owe him a reclimb to complete the trip. I still keep that promise." Every year, Barry and his nephews reclimb the same route, not to find Carl, but to confirm that their friend has not been forgotten. Carl Landers has no burial, no headstone, no official anniversary, but he lives on in the memories of hundreds. The footprints that were never found on Mount Shasta are clear to his family, his comrades, and even those who never knew him. The disappearance raises questions about human limits, about randomness and destiny, and most importantly, it makes people understand that even the most familiar, safest places with the most experienced people can still become places of mystery. Carl Landers was not a victim. He was a witness to the delicate balance between reason and chaos. His disappearance was more than an accident. It was a message of humility before nature, and of the secrets we are sometimes not allowed to know. Carl Lander's disappearance may have been a dead end, but Mount Shasta still draws climbers, investigators, and paranormal enthusiasts back each year. In this final installment, we delve deeper into the forgotten theories, the unseen witnesses, and the mysterious phenomena that have kept the case forever shrouded in mystery. There is no denying that Carl's disappearance has been a big question mark for both the climbing community and the investigating researchers. From the final SAR report, GPS data, satellite images, and even personal notes found by family and friends, none of them have provided a clear answer. In this final chapter, amateur investigators hold an annual meeting at the foot of the mountain. They reconstruct Carl's journey meter by meter, using both terrain and travel time analysis AI. A behavioral model suggests that Carl may have suffered from hypoxic confusion, leading him to stray just a few hundred meters off the main trail, a place no one would have thought to look. Some have suggested that he walked into a small avalanche area where he was buried shortly afterwards, something that, given the weather conditions, would have likely happened without leaving a trace. However, no clothing or tools have ever been found. Many strange theories have also been put forward, from the collapse of space and time to the intervention of intelligent beings beyond our understanding. Spiritualists believe that Carl was called by the spirit of Mount Shasta itself, a place long associated with the legend of Lemuria and the dimensional portals. What makes this case special is not just the disappearance, but the way it has defied both science and common sense. For more than 2 decades, nothing has been found, and no one has given up hope. Carl's son, now in his late 60s, still returns to the foot of the mountain every year, leaving a letter for his father, a longed-for message that has never been answered. The story ends with a small ceremony on the 25th anniversary of Carl's disappearance. Climbers erected a small memorial at 5050, the last place Carl was seen. On it was engraved a quote from his own diary: "Every mountain has a soul, and if you're not careful, it will keep a piece of you forever." Why? Carl Landers is now more than just a missing person. He has become a symbol of what we cannot understand, of the mysterious power of nature, and of the resilience that refuses to surrender in the face of the unknown. And somewhere among the clouds and snow of Shasta, there may still be a figure, silent, alone, and never to be found. 25 years after his disappearance, the name Carl Landers is no longer mentioned much in the media. However, in the hearts of veteran climbers, he remains an icon, an inspirational figure of resilience, courage, and unsolved mystery. In Orinda, the town where Carl lived, he is still mentioned at athletic club meetings. Carl was the first person to encourage me to run a 10K, one member recalled. He never complained, he just kept moving forward. The local high school has a plaque in Carl's honor in its gymnasium, engraved with a quote from his own diary: "To live is to climb, not to reach the top, but to understand yourself on the way up." Although the case was closed by the authorities, several independent investigative groups continued to pursue leads. In 2023, a group called Echo Peak Explorers announced that they had discovered a piece of red-purple cloth deep in a crevice west of Shastarama Point, more than 2 kilometers from the main disappearance site. However, DNA testing revealed that the fabric was synthetic and did not match the shirt Carl had been wearing. Once again, hope was dashed, but the persistence of the disappearance suggests that it has inspired not only empathy, but also a determination to explore the very nature of things. On climbing forums like Summit Post and Mountain Project, the Landers mystery thread still gets thousands of comments each year, and many first-time climbers of Shasta say they started their journey because they were drawn to the mystery. Some psychological research groups have suggested that the disappearance of someone as disciplined, experienced, and well-mannered as Carl has created a profound challenge in the public mind. If it could happen to him, could it happen to any of us? Carl's story became legendary. Young climbers would say his name as a reminder: don't be complacent. Don't turn away if you're not sure. But beyond the warning, there was also admiration. Admiration for someone who dared to live his passion to the fullest, until the very end. In a Stanford University seminar, a sociologist once said, "Carl Landers is not simply a victim of a climbing accident. He is a symbol of the limits of human understanding. Until we find the answer, he remains a living question in the heart of nature." In May 2024, exactly 25 years after his disappearance, a small group of Carl's family and friends climbed Lake Helen. The weather was clear and snow covered the rocks. No one spoke. Carl's son gently placed a water bottle with his father's name engraved on it at the 50-50 mark. Bobby, now 91, couldn't come along, but left a note. "Go in peace. I'm still waiting in my heart." No one knows exactly what happened to Carl Landers, but his disappearance left behind something beyond his physical presence. An emotion, a legend, a reminder that sometimes the questions without answers are the ones that make us more human. As night fell on Shasta, the wind still whistled through the snow-capped cliffs, and somewhere in the thick fog, the figure of a climber still rose in the imagination. Not to find a body, but to remind him that some journeys never need to be returned. Carl Landers is gone, but he's never really gone. If Carl was the one who disappeared, Barry was the one who remained. In the years that followed, he not only bore the pain, but also became the keeper of a friend's memory and an unfinished story. Barry continued to live in Orinda quietly and patiently. He still wrote letters to Carl's family every year, still talked to his son as a way to keep the last link. He once said, "I think if I'd been more determined that day," stopped Carl. Maybe, but then he fell silent. No one really knows what happened, not even the last person to see Carl. In his later years, Barry devoted his time to recording his entire journey in a thick diary. Not to publish, but to preserve for posterity. He called it the story of the follower. Not to explain, but to tell. In the winter of 2029, Barry passed away at the age of 83. Before he died, he told his children and grandchildren, "If anyone asks, tell them Carl was the most loyal friend I ever had. And I still believe he is somewhere close by. Just a turn of the head and I can see him." Barry's family held a joint memorial service for both him and Carl at Shasta Lake. During the service, they read aloud a final passage from the diary. "We climbed, we tired, we laughed, and we lost each other. But none of us really disappeared. We just moved from one mountain to another, where our souls continued their journey." For people like Barry, death is not the end. It is the promise that memories will live on, in books and stories, and in the hearts of those who love the truth. Carl Landers disappears. Barry tells the story quietly, and we, the readers, carry that light on.